Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of On the Whistle, where we're going to be having a chat about Man United 2, Sunderland 0. We knew there were going to be a few of these days over the course of the season, a really disappointing day for Sunderland and a pretty poor performance, and we'll get into all of that and have a look at your questions and comments in a minute. Just want to say a big thanks to everyone who's bought a ticket for the live show on Tuesday. I think there are literally a couple left at this point, so I'll leave the link in the bio, but if you want to come along, I'd urge you to get involved pretty quickly, because I say we're nearly at a sellout. So thanks to everyone who's bought tickets, and looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday for a good chat about the season so far. Yeah, a disappointing day at Old Trafford, really. It was an interesting one in that I thought Sunderland started and quite aggressively and actually quite brightly, and there's obviously that really interesting moment where Xhaka plays that lovely pass for Dingra, whose low cross comes across the box and Traore can't convert it. You know, a position where I think he would expect to score from. Now, of course, the offside flag goes up, but actually when I saw the replay back at Old Trafford, it did look like Delight might have been playing Dingra on side, so it would have been really interesting if Traore had scored. There certainly would have been a VAR check, and who knows, maybe the whole complexion of the game changes with Man United coming into the game under a lot of pressure. Maybe the atmosphere starts to get very different at Old Trafford if Sunderland take the lead. So even though I know the offside flag went up, it felt like a really important moment in the game, because I'd have been really interested to see that one back. It was interesting that Sunderland felt like, and whether this was by design or whether this was the way that Man United set up, invited them onto them a little bit. I felt a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more open than we've seen in most away games this season, and certainly at Nottingham Forest. And you kind of felt like the game was going to go either way early on. Now, as it happened, Man United take the lead, and I think that's a really poor goal from a Sunderland perspective. The one thing that you said about Sunderland this season is that no matter what, they've defended their box excellently well, and they made it really, really hard for the opposition to score and break them down. I think when you look at that first goal, it's a lovely finish from Mason Mount, picks the corner perfectly, and we saw from what Robin Ruffs did elsewhere in the game, you have to get your finish perfect to score past him. But I think not enough pressure to stop the cross coming in from the flank, not enough pressure on Mount. I think you'd expect Michele Alderete to get closer to him. So that was a really, really disappointing goal for Sunderland to concede. And I think it was at a bad time in the game as well, because I think you could feel Man United start to settle. There were obviously a lot of nerves, a lot of pressure coming into this game. And then ultimately you see that there's a lot of quality in this team. And I know there was a lot of talk, understandably so, about Man United's poor start to the season, their form. But on home turf with some key players back, I think you could see that they are still a very, very strong side with a lot of good individual players. I think that the return of Ahmad, who obviously missed the Brentford game, I think was a big boost for them, because you could see he just pushed someone back. Someone were never really able to get a foothold in the game because of how easy Ahmad found it to drive and field and to get to the edge of the box and carry the ball. I thought his combination play with Mbeumo was excellent, and Mbeumo had a really, really strong game. And Sunderland, I think for a little bit, we're just a little bit outclassed. I think that's fair to say. Fernandes and Casemiro, although I thought Xhaka played well, I thought broadly speaking those two dominated midfield. I think Fernandes's combination of tenacity but also his quality and the speed with which he can pass, I think Sunderland found it a little bit difficult to deal with that, and they were moving the ball quickly enough out wide to then have Mbeumo and Ahmad really isolating Sunderland down that left side. And that was a persistent theme really until Ibris made those changes. And it's really easy to say in hindsight, and I try and avoid it too much, but I think when you look back, the setup just didn't feel quite right yesterday. I don't think there's been too many times in his tenure as Sunderland head coach where you've looked at it and gone, you know, I think Sunderland have left themselves a little bit exposed here. I'm not so sure the selection was quite right. I think that Masuaku and Adingra have qualities. You saw again yesterday, Masuaku put some nice balls in the box. Seen across the early phase of the season that Adingra's got some real quality. He can be very strong 1v1 with players. But I think defensively, I think that was too much of a dip, if you like, from where we've been this season with, for example, with Reinildo and Lefebvre. So it was one where I just felt, I don't want to say that Sunderland were overly ambitious, but I think maybe they just got away from the basics a little bit from what has made them so strong in the opening weeks of the season. And I think you do have to give credit for Man United as well, who I think certainly after the first goal grew in confidence and played some pretty good football. Bringing Ballard on obviously made a big difference in the game. The VAR drama was just quite a sort of strange sequence of events. I'm not convinced the wrong decision was made, to be honest. I think if that was the other way around, and I always think that's a good yardstick to assess these decisions, I think as people following Sunderland, I think would have been disappointed if Trey Hume had been penalised, given a penalty away for that challenge if it had been on Sesko, because obviously he doesn't make any contact with his head. I think you can definitely make an argument that it's a bit clumsy. But the odd thing about the decision was obviously we went from a corner to then the referee overturning his own initial decision to then VAR overturning the decision. It felt a little bit farcical, but I think possibly that the right decision was made. Ultimately, Ballard should then score from the corner that follows it anyway. That's an absolutely massive chance. I know he'll be really disappointed that he didn't score that. The one in the second half with Traore is a tricky one. I think regardless of whether you feel there's a foul either from Lamens or Fernandes when he goes to on goal and just nips the ball past the goalkeeper, there's absolutely nowhere to dive. So that was a really, really harsh decision for Traore to get a yellow card. I'm not absolutely sure I know myself what the right decision would have been in terms of the level of punishment, but certainly not a dive. So there were those little margins that went against Sunderland yesterday, but I have to say Lebris was asked about this in his post-match press conference, and I thought his response was spot on really, which was to say that it's not really the day to be talking about the referee because mainly it was about us. We weren't good enough, and one decision I don't think would necessarily have changed the course of the game. I thought there was some decent stuff in Sunderland's second half performance. I thought Mayenda in particular, I thought looked bright when he came on. He made some things happen. I thought his first touch was really good, opened up Man United a little bit. There were definitely some kind of nice aspects of the play. I thought the combination of Michele and Geertruida out wide right, I thought when Sunderland switched formation showed some promising signs moving forwards. That's definitely another option that Lebris will feel he has now. But I think you also have to say that Lamens had a fairly comfortable afternoon on debut. He won a lot of praise for his performance, and fair enough given the pressure he was under, but I don't think Sunderland worked him anywhere near well enough either from their shots or from their deliveries into the box, which I think were fairly routine claims for the most part. I thought Man United were pretty much in control for much of the second half, which in a lot of ways was a little bit of a non-event really. Yes, there's little moments where Sunderland had made a little bit more of it. They could have made the game interesting, but Man United would say the same thing, I think, as well when they got into some promising positions. So I think for me it's one of those where it's important from a Sunderland perspective certainly not to overreact to it, because games like yesterday certainly aren't going to define the season, and we knew that there were going to be days across the course of the season where Sunderland just fell a little bit short. At Premier League level, you're going to come against teams where even if you play well, the individual quality of the opposition is going to be so strong that you lose anyway. The frustration for Sunderland will be that wasn't really the case yesterday. As I said, that's not taken away from Man United, who I thought produced a good performance. Ahmad and Buemo, Fernandes I mentioned. I thought Casemiro was very, very strong as well, doing the simple things incredibly effectively. But Sunderland will feel they were kind of the architects of their own downfall, really, with that first half performance, the way that they didn't defend their boxes as well as we know they can do. And I wonder if, we'll certainly ask him about this next time we see him, but I wonder if when Lebris had time to analyse the game and reflect on the game, I wonder if maybe he'll feel that he left Sunderland a little bit exposed and that maybe he tried to move a bit more attacking a little bit too soon and a little bit too, try to push it a little bit forward too much, if that makes sense, because I certainly think down that left-hand side, it's easy to say in hindsight, but that looked like an area of the pitch where Sunderland had stronger players going forward than it did defensively, and up against Ahmad, with Buemo pulling into that side and combining, it felt like a little bit of an error. Great to see Ahmad confident and playing well, just a shame that it was against Sunderland, but yeah, a really strong performance from him, and Ruben Amorim rightly gave him a lot of praise in his post-match press conference. So yeah, let's have a little look at your questions and comments on this game. There's quite a few came in, some of them around similar topics, so I think that we'll batch a few in them together. So the first one here from Tom over on Blue Sky, he says, definitely learning curve today, individual and collectively. We were naive and made mistakes. I appreciate that. Do you think the back five would have made a difference? I'm neither despondent nor disappointed. Regis will definitely learn from this. Should we have had a penalty? Yeah, as I said before, I'm not convinced that it was a penalty really. I think it was a bit odd the way it all worked out. But I think I would have been disappointed if it had been the other way around. So I'm reluctant to sort of criticise the officiating too much for that. I thought booking Traore for a foul was a worse decision, although exactly what the right decision was, I'm not quite sure. So definitely not a day, in my opinion. I agree with Lebris to be talking too much about the refereeing. The back five did kind of make a difference. It absolutely did make a difference. I think Lebris spoke about the fact that Man United were actually quite direct, and speaking to a lot of people after the game who watch Man United regularly, they certainly went a bit more direct than they have been this season from the goalkeeper. I think that a lot of people who watch Man United noted that Lamens went direct a lot more than the goalkeeper usually has done under Amorim in this season. And I think Sunderland did struggle to cope with that, and Ballard obviously made a huge difference, and there's no great coincidence that they got a much better foothold in the game when Ballard came onto the pitch and they were able to dominate Gilles a little bit more. Sunderland clearly had a lot of issues in the start of the game when Man United were playing into Sesko and were then jumping on those second balls with Mbeumo in particular, and Ahmad and even Mason Mount as well. So it's probably one of those where I think a back five might well have made a difference, though again, once Man United are 2-0 ahead, they can manage the game. They don't have to take too many risks. So I think it probably makes sense that Sunderland had more of the ball and looked a little bit stronger in that phase of the game. So I definitely think the selection was wrong. I don't think it necessarily had to be a back five to make a difference. I think Sunderland just need to be a little bit more solid, certainly out on that left flank, but across the pitch really. And it wasn't just about the setup either. I think there were too many players really who didn't hit the level that they've reached this season. When you go to Old Trafford, regardless of what anyone thinks about the strength of Man United's team, that's going to cost you. So yeah, I definitely think, I agree with you that Regis will definitely learn a lot from it, and I think the players will as well. I think there's a harsh lesson to be learnt there that Sunderland have to be at their very, very, very best every week if they're going to have any chance of getting points from a Premier League game. And yesterday, they certainly weren't that. So Ian says, first 30 minutes we were poor, but after we switched to a back three, we improved and had chances to get back into it. Just gave ourselves too much to do. You think it's just an off day and it just didn't click for us? Also, is it not fair to say we probably caught Man United on a rare good day? Yeah, I think that's all very much fair. It was definitely an off day for Sunderland. I think we've had enough games this season to have a feel for what this team is, what its strengths are, maybe what its little weaknesses are. I'd be really surprised if Sunderland concede goals as soft as that on a regular basis. And I think after a little bit of a break and a chance to reset and reflect on this game, certainly think Sunderland will look very, very different against Wolves, and hopefully we'll see, certainly from the start, a much better level of intensity and a much better sort of cohesion about the team. And I think it's important to say that Man United did play well. Especially at home, they're still a good side, and we'll see that over the course of the season. Key players, as I mentioned, key players coming back made a big difference. Ahmad and Casemiro in particular. So certainly agree with Ian in the sense that there's no major need for an overreaction. I think sometimes, we knew there were going to be days like this season. It's important that someone react to that. They did that very, very well after the Burnley game, so hopefully they can do that after this game, because obviously that Wolves game is going to be absolutely huge. So thanks to that, Ian. Over on X, we've also got a question here from Michael, who says, bit of a reality check for us today. Didn't take our chances when we did carve them out. Thankfully, our season won't be defined by getting beat at Old Trafford. Will Regis look at making some significant changes over the international break, or tinker and refine what's worked so far? Yeah, I think it's more going to be a case about kind of tinkering and refining. And it's really interesting because the brief spoke after the Nottingham Forest game about he felt that you could see that the structure of the team was really, really strong, and that was the foundation that Sunderland needed, and that's what's going to give them a chance of survival. But also pointing out that he would like them to be better on the ball, he would like them to be able to express themselves a little bit better, and that was something that he was going to focus on. I think that's an ongoing process, but I think yesterday probably underlined as well that you can't go too far away from those foundations when you're trying to stabilise in this league. So I don't expect to see any changes, any major changes. Obviously Wolves is going to be a really, really different game. It's going to look completely different. It's going to feel completely different. There's going to be more of an emphasis on someone to try and go and win that game. So that'll be interesting to see how Lebris adapts to that. But I don't think there's going to be any major changes. If anything, I kind of see it the other way, to be honest. I think off the back of yesterday's performance, especially away from home, I think there's now almost an argument for a little bit back to basics in terms of what's worked for Sunderland so far this season, because I thought certainly in the first half an hour, maybe they went a little bit too far away from that too soon. I also had a question on Blue Sky from Ian, who says, just wondering, Phil, if we need to make sure Ballard is in the team somehow. Definitely looked more solid when he was on. Yeah, I agree with that, and I said ahead of the Nottingham Forest game that although it's not ideal, I just felt that was the perfect opportunity with Reynoldo's suspension to get Ballard back into the team, because of what he brings you in both boxes. And I think the platform he helps give the team through his kind of dominance in the air and duels, the way he can pinch the ball as well when the team try and play forward to their striker. I think it's really important attributes that make someone a better team. And I think when you're coming into the Premier League and you're trying to survive and you're trying to get a foothold, I think you've just got to maximise your strength and try and hide your weaknesses. And I think getting Ballard in the team is one of the best ways to do that. To be fair to Lebris, the team looked really strong at Nottingham Forest and he managed the game well. Masuaku played for an hour, Ballard then came on and made an impact, so it's difficult to criticise. But I definitely think with Reynolds still suspended at the moment, I think it's the right opportunity to get Ballard back in this team, because I think Sunderland is stronger with him in it. Now, I can completely understand why Lebris is reluctant to do it in some senses, because pretty much any combination we talk about, back three is obviously one option, but any combination of a back four with Hume going over to left back or Getroida coming in at left back, obviously you're pretty much guaranteed with the way Sunderland are set up at the moment, the wingers that they have, you're going to have two right footers on the left flank, and that's never quite ideal. It can make you very predictable, and it can also really slow your build-up play down, because the opposition knows that what both those players are going to want to do, which is to come inside, and it can make you a bit predictable. So I agree in whether that's going to a back three or in playing Masuaku. Obviously that means you do have to kind of lose a player from forward areas. At home, I think Lebris is, which is obviously the next game against Wolves, I think Lebris will be minded to try and keep things as stable as possible and as consistent in terms of his approach, which I completely agree with. I think there's a really strong argument for getting Ballard back, whether that's moving Mukele out to right back, where I thought he looked strong yesterday, and moving Hume across, or whether that's bringing Getroida in. I think either way, I'd be a bit disappointed if Ballard wasn't in the team when Sunderland play Wolves, because although it's probably not absolutely ideal for the setup of the side in terms of those, as I mentioned, those two right footers, I think we're a stronger team with Ballard in it, and I think we have a better chance of keeping clean sheets and a better chance of scoring goals, and therefore a better chance of winning games. I did put that question in to Lebris after the game about whether he needs to find a way to get Ballard in, and he noted, as I mentioned before, about how much of a difference Ballard made in helping Sunderland deal with that direct approach. So it's definitely something that's in his mind, and I think that'll be something that he's thinking about over the course of the international break. Similar from Andy over on Blue Sky, says we would target on our left side today until RLB changed it. I think this is as defending is not a strong point of both Masuaku and Adingra. Will RLB learn that you can't start Adingra unless he has a more solid defender behind him? I'd like to see Getroida get a start next game. He looks solid. Yeah, it looked good again. Getroida, obviously, the game situation had a part in that in terms of Man Utd kind of managing the game. So that allowed him, I think, to ease his way into it. But for sure, he looked strong and he'll be in contention. Yeah, I kind of agree. I just think football is about partnerships and chemistry, isn't it? And I think that Masuaku and Adingra could give you an awful lot in a game where you're dominating the ball and you're really high up the pitch, because they've both got quality. Adingra coming inside and Masuaku over the overlap. So I can definitely see a world in which those two players can give you a really strong combination. But I just think maybe away from home it was a little bit naive to play them both together. So yeah, I asked RLB about the Adingra sub after the game, and I'm going to bring another comment in here because I'm pretty sure somebody else asked about, Robert here, who says, do you think Adingra has been harshly treated? Haven't him seen him do anything wrong yet? He barely plays. And I kind of agree with that, because I think he shows some real ability on the ball at times, and he looks like one of the players that can make something happen. And I asked Lebris about obviously taking Adingra off in the first half, and he was at pains to point out really that it wasn't so much about Adingra, it wasn't a criticism of his individual performance, it was just about needing to change the setup, and as I mentioned before, getting somebody on who could deal with those direct balls, which obviously Ballard did superbly well. So I don't think this is kind of a major setback for Adingra in terms of, I think, Lebris explained after the game that he brought Adingra and Traore in because he'd been impressed with them in Nottingham Forest. They trained well. He felt it was important to give them an opportunity. So I definitely think that this isn't going to be one of those situations where Adingra suddenly disappears and we don't see him for a while in the starting lineup. I think he's definitely got something to offer. But yeah, I think football's about partnerships, and I think a little bit, especially as someone stabilised, I think if Ray Nurlo's not in the team, maybe you need someone on that left wing who can give really strong cover to Masuaku if that is who it is. If you go a different way and you play a stronger defender at left back, whether that's Hume or Getroida or even Mukele, then maybe that gives you a little bit more license to play a more attacking winger. But I wouldn't be surprised if for the next game we see Enzo kind of move out there, because Dingra's got a lot of qualities, but I don't think there's much doubt that Lafay offers a little bit more in terms of his cover defensively on that part of the pitch. So let's have one more question over on X from Clint, who says, how long before Mundle is back? We need extra creativity on the wings. Yeah, Mundle is back doing some work, but I asked Lebris about this in the pre-match press conference on Thursday, and he said it's probably still looking about a month and a half. I think you've just got to remember how much of pre-season Mundle missed. Obviously, a month to a month and a half sounds like quite a lot in terms of time, but in terms of matches, it's not too much, obviously, because you've got the international break coming up and you've got another international break in November. So hopefully we'll start seeing him sort of come back into full training and start to knock on the door a little bit towards this next run of matches. And then with a bit of luck, after the November international break, you'll maybe see Mundle starting to get towards full speed and really competing. That's going to be massive, because we've talked about it before on some of these videos. The area where Sunderland look most vulnerable when the Africa Cup of Nations comes around is out wide. So getting Mundle up to full speed for that point is going to be really important. And the key thing for that is as well is that you don't want to rush him for that scenario. You want him at his best at that point. So I think Sunderland will rightly be relatively cautious, but for sure he can bring something a little bit different. One last question here from Mark, who says, was letting Roberts leave on loan the right thing to do? Yeah, I said at the time, I love Patrick Roberts. So I was really, really sad to see him go and thought he could make a contribution. I think it's important not to overreact too much to one start from Bertrand Traore. I thought he did well at Nottingham Forest. I thought yesterday there's obviously one or two things that if it goes slightly differently, it looks like a really good decision to play him. Obviously, if he can get on the end of that cross from Adingra, there was, as I mentioned, that really harsh decision to put him for diving. There's lots of little ways in the game that things could have gone a bit differently. So I think it's important not to overreact too much. And I think the thing for Roberts was he'd done too much and made too much of a contribution to the club to ask him to kind of not play regularly. If you think about the loan spells he'd gone through before he came to Sunderland where he couldn't get a game, I think it was really important to do the right thing by him and let him go out and play regularly week in, week out was the right thing to do. So I kind of get where the question comes from, and I was disappointed to see Roberts leave and felt he could have had an impact, but I think it's a bit too soon to say that it was the wrong decision in terms of the options that Sunderland have. I think we're still seeing how that works out, and it wasn't Bertrand Traore's best game yesterday, but I think it's way too soon to say that he won't have an impact this season because there's clearly a bit of quality there. So there we go. I managed to talk for over 20 minutes about a 2-0 defeat. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. So yeah, the link's in the bio for the live show. As I say, there's literally a couple of tickets there, but hopefully you might be able to, if you want to come in, you might be able to get in and pinch them. So hopefully see lots of you there on Tuesday. Thanks for watching.